Hello there, and welcome back to Gaming Slumber. Today, we'll be going over 2 hours of Fallout facts to help you fall asleep. I know you use these fact videos to help relax, so I thought it would be nice if you left a comment telling me where you're listening from and what your favorite thing about Fallout is. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying these calming fact videos. Now it's time to get comfortable, relax, and begin. The forecaster child in New Vegas has terrifying implications. The forecaster, a strange child found near the 188 trading post in Fallout New Vegas, appears to be a simple fortune teller, offering vague predictions for caps. However, his dialogue contains references that should be impossible for him to know. He mentions the eye that watches from the west before you've ever encountered Mr. House, describes details about your own past that you haven't shared, and if you kill him and search his body, he carries no food or water, suggesting he doesn't need sustenance like normal humans. Cut dialogue reveals he was originally meant to be far more integral to the plot, with lines suggesting he's either a psychic mutant created by Big MT experiments or possibly a manifestation of some undefined wasteland phenomena. Most disturbingly, there's unused audio where he describes the courier's death in exact detail if you're wearing certain items, and he occasionally references the other voices that tell him things. Obsidian developer Josh Sawyer later confirmed the forecaster was inspired by the Shining Children from old science fiction stories, mutants who develop genuine precognition after radiation exposure. The fact that he's never explained and simply exists on the roadside makes him one of the most unsettling background elements in the entire game. Fallout 2's Ghost Farm has a scientific explanation hidden in plain sight. The Ghost Farm random encounter in Fallout 2, where you meet a family of ghosts including a father, a mother, a son, and a dog who all died in the nuclear war, seems like pure supernatural horror, until you piece together what's actually happening. If you have high science and perception, you can notice subtle visual distortions around the farm, and examining the ground reveals unusual radiation signatures that don't match normal Fallout patterns. The ghosts are actually psychic projections created by residual FEV experiments that were being conducted at a nearby facility before the war. Documents found in the Glow reference, Project Revenant, which attempted to preserve human consciousness using a combination of FEV and experimental computer technology. The Ghost Farm is ground zero for a failed test where subjects' brain patterns were accidentally broadcast into the environment, creating persistent hallucinations experienced by anyone who enters the area. The truly tragic part though, the family doesn't know they're dead. If you have the empathy perk, additional dialogue appears where the father begins to realize something is wrong, asking why they're so hungry but can't eat, why their neighbors never visit anymore. The encounter ends with them fading away, whether you tell them the truth or not, suggesting the psychic imprint is finally degrading after 164 years. Vault 77's Puppet Man was so disturbing, he became NCR legend. Vault 77 never appears in any mainline Fallout game, but its story is told through a promotional comic and references scattered throughout Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. This Vault's experiment was brutally simple. One man, a box of puppets, and absolutely nothing else. The comic shows the lone resident slowly descending into madness, creating an entire society of puppet characters to maintain his sanity. What most fans don't realize is that this character eventually escaped, and his Vault 77 jumpsuit appears as a rare item in Fallout 3's Paradise Falls, worn by slavers who claim they took it off the craziest son of a bitch they ever met. According to terminal entries, the Vault 77 occupant single-handedly destroyed an entire raider gang using only puppet-based psychological warfare, leaving survivors so traumatized they spread stories about the Puppet Man as a wasteland boogeyman. In Fallout New Vegas, there's an unmarked encounter where an NCR soldier tells a campfire story about a vault dweller who went to war with himself and won, making his puppets so real they became his army. The Penny Arcade comic reveals his final fate. He eventually died alone in a cave, surrounded by hundreds of handmade puppets arranged as if attending his funeral. Vault-Tech's experiment to study extreme isolation succeeded, but created something far more disturbing than insanity. A man who completely replaced human society with his own fabricated reality. The glowing sea's real-world inspiration is even more horrifying. Fallout 4's glowing sea, the massive, irradiated crater southwest of Boston, was directly inspired by the Chernobyl exclusion zone, but also by theoretical projections of what a direct nuclear strike on a major city would actually look like decades later. Bethesda's environmental artists consulted with nuclear physicists and used declassified Cold War documents about ground zero conditions. What makes the glowing sea particularly realistic is the persistent radiation storms. These are based on actual scientific predictions about how pulverized radioactive material would remain suspended in the atmosphere, creating perpetual weather systems that recirculate fallout. The mutated creatures there aren't just random monsters. They're based on actual observed mutations in Chernobyl wildlife, scaled up obviously for dramatic effect. Death claws, rad scorpions, and other creatures congregate there because radiation has become essential to their metabolism, mirroring how certain fungi in Chernobyl actually feed on radiation through radiosynthesis. Hidden among the ruins are several locations suggesting pre-war inhabitants knew the bombs were coming but had nowhere to run. Skeleton arrangements in bunkers show families that survived the initial blast but slowly died of radiation poisoning over weeks. One particularly grim terminal entry in a buried shelter describes a mother slowly watching her children die from acute radiation syndrome, documenting their symptoms day by day until the entries suddenly stop. The Institute's railroad infiltration goes deeper than anyone realizes. In Fallout 4, the Railroad Institute conflict appears straightforward: freedom fighters versus synth slavers. However, careful examination of terminals and environmental storytelling reveals the Institute has successfully infiltrated the railroad to an extraordinary degree. Multiple named railroad agents are actually Institute synths reporting back, and if you complete the game by siding with the Institute, you can find post-game terminals revealing that Glory, Deacon, and even Pam may have been compromised or monitored throughout your entire playthrough. What's particularly sinister is that the Institute doesn't just use this infiltration to destroy the railroad. They deliberately keep it alive as a pressure release valve to identify and track synths who develop independence. Terminal entries from Institute directors suggest they view the railroad as useful idiots who make escaped simps easier to track by forcing them into predictable safe houses and patterns. There's even evidence suggesting Patriot, the mysterious Institute insider helping simps escape, may himself be a sanctioned operative allowing a controlled stream of escapes to test simp independence and improve future models. The real mindbender is terminal entry suggesting Father knew about your involvement with the railroad before the meeting where he reveals it, making his entire relationship with you a manipulative test of loyalty versus sympathy. Fallout 3's Vault 106 experiment created the first successful psychics. Vault 106, filled with crazed survivors and hallucination-inducing gas, seems like a straightforward drug test gone wrong scenario. However, buried deep in the Vault's research terminals is evidence that the psychoactive compound released into the air wasn't a failure. It was actually a complete success. The experiment's true purpose wasn't to test behavior under hallucinogenic conditions, but to artificially induce psychic abilities through neurochemical enhancement. The hallucinations players experience aren't random. They're actually the psychic death echoes of the Vault's residents. Their final traumatic moments burned into the environment itself. If you have the Lawbringer or Contract Killer perk, you receive unique hallucinations showing alternate versions of yourself, suggesting the gas allows perception across probability branches. Terminal entries from the lead researcher describe test subjects beginning to share dreams, predict events, and in one case, apparently causing physical harm to another person through thought alone, before the experiment spiraled out of control. The researcher's final entry describes the subjects achieving collective consciousness before they all simultaneously died. What remained was their psychic residue, endlessly replaying their last moments. This explains why the Master in Fallout 1 was so interested in Vault-Tech's experiments. Some Vaults were actually testing ground for abilities he was trying to artificially create with FEV. Fallout New Vegas's Cut Companion exposed Vault-Tech's darkest secret. Obsidian Entertainment planned a companion named Ulysses for the main game before moving him to the Lonesome Road DLC. But even earlier drafts included a completely different character, a Vault-Tech scientist who survived in cryogenic suspension and knew the corporation's ultimate purpose. According to leaked design documents and Chris Avalone's GDC presentations, this character would have revealed that Vault-Tech knew exactly when the bombs would fall because they helped orchestrate the Great War itself. The Vaults weren't shelters with experiments. They were experiments that happened to be shelters. The scientist would explain that Vault-Tech was a front for a transitional corporate shadow government that believed nuclear war was inevitable and wanted to control human evolution in its aftermath. Each Vault experiment was designed to solve specific challenges of space colonization. Vault 11 tested obedience to authority. Vault 108 tested cloning. Vault 112 tested virtual reality sustainability, and so on. The revelation would reframe the entire series. The Great War wasn't political failure, but planned corporate eugenics on a global scale. Obsidian cut this character because Bethesda felt it was too definitive an answer to questions best left ambiguous, and because it made Vault-Tech unambiguously evil rather than recklessly experimental. Traces of this concept remain in terminals throughout Fallout New Vegas discussing the selection and also Project Exodus, hinting at a planned corporate evacuation that never happened. The mysterious stranger is actually observable through game code analysis. The mysterious stranger, the enigmatic figure who occasionally appears to help you in combat, has been analyzed extensively by data miners, revealing deliberate design choices that make him even stranger. In every Fallout game he appears, the stranger is coded as a unique entity that exists outside normal NPC parameters. He has no dialogue flags, no faction associations, no inventory beyond his iconic .44 Magnum, and most bizarrely, no AI packages for anything except appearing and disappearing. What's genuinely weird is that in Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, the game tracks every single mysterious stranger appearance in a hidden counter that has no apparent purpose. It's not tied to any achievement or perk. Some modders who've examined this suggest it was meant to trigger a hidden quest after a certain number of appearances, but no such quest exists in the files. In Fallout 4, where the stranger is followed around by his own companion Misfortune, there are unused voice files where NPCs react to seeing him, suggesting Bethesda originally planned to make other characters acknowledge his existence before deciding his supernatural ambiguity was more interesting. Most intriguingly, the stranger shares a character model skeleton with an unnamed NPC type labeled Observer in Fallout 3's code, which appears in exactly one location, watching from a distance when you exit Vault 101 for the first time. The implication is that he's been following you from the very beginning. Fallout 2's intelligent plants were remnants of a pre-war superweapon. In Fallout 2, you can encounter Seymour, a talking spore plant in Gecko, who seems like a quirky one-off character providing comic relief. However, Seymour is actually a surviving specimen of Project Bloomsday, a pre-war bioweapon designed to terraform enemy territory by converting it into hostile plant-based ecosystems. Documents in the Sierra Army Depot reference experimental, aggressive botanical specimens that escaped containment shortly before the Great War. Seymour and the other spore plants scattered throughout the wasteland aren't FEV mutations. They're genetically engineered weapons that were designed to think, adapt, and spread. If you have a high science skill, Seymour reveals details about the others like him and mentions feeling connected to plants across vast distances, suggesting a hive mind network. The horrifying implication is that these plants are still following their original programming: convert organic matter into more plants, eventually creating a Venus-like atmosphere unsuitable for unmodified human life. This concept was later revisited in Fallout 3's Point Lookout DLC, where the Punga plants show similar invasive intelligence, and again in Fallout 76 with the Strangler plants. Harold's transformation into a tree god in Fallout 3 might not be random mutation, but the result of exposure to these same pre-war plant bioweapons, with his FEV mutated body providing the perfect host for their ultimate evolution. The Enclave's oil rig headquarters had a secret presidential bunker below it. In Fallout 2, you destroy the Enclave's oil rig headquarters, but cut content and developer interviews reveal there was an entire additional level below the main facility that never made it into the final game. This level housed the continuity of government bunker, where pre-war presidents and key officials were supposed to shelter during nuclear war. According to Chris Avallone, this area would have contained cryogenically preserved pre-war government officials who were supposed to wake up and rebuild America, but the system failed, leaving them frozen in a state between life and death. The current Enclave leadership under Dick Richardson knew about this bunker, but never told the general population, because many of the preserved officials wouldn't have supported the Enclave's genocidal plans. You would have had the option to revive these officials and potentially create a faction split within the Enclave between old guard, pre-war constitutionalists and the new fascist regime. The level was cut due to time constraints, and because testers found it tonally confusing. Having sympathetic Enclave members complicated the intended final boss narrative. However, references remain in Fallout 3's archives where President Eden mentions the Frozen Council and those who sleep beneath Raven Rock, suggesting Bethesda consider reviving this concept. The moral complexity of executing people who've been in cryo-sleep since before the war, who believe they're still serving United States that no longer exists, would have added fascinating depth to Fallout 2's endgame. The tragic tale of Vault 11's democracy gone dark. Vault 11 stands as one of the most disturbing experiments in the entire series, yet many players miss its full horror. This Vault's experiment required residents to sacrifice one overseer annually, with the threat that everyone would be killed if they refused. Over time, this led to a nightmarish political system where rival blocks would nominate each other's members for execution. The Vault descended into propaganda wars, political murders, and eventually a coup where 5 survivors finally refused to sacrifice anyone. The twist? Well, when they rebelled, the Vault computer revealed they'd passed the test and were free to leave. The refusal to murder was the true objective all along. Only 4 survivors made it outside, and according to found terminal entries, they apparently killed each other shortly after in despair over what they'd done. This Vault perfectly encapsulates Vault-Tech's cruel social experiments and humanity's capacity for both evil and redemption. The cut content that would have made Mr. House even more sinister. Robert House's character in Fallout New Vegas was originally meant to be far more morally ambiguous than the final version. Cut content and dialogue trees reveal that House was planning to reinstate a form of systematic slavery in New Vegas, not just tolerating the Omertas and their exploitative practices, but actively expanding them as an economic model. Developers removed this content to make House a more viable, grey choice rather than obviously evil, but traces remain in the game files. Additionally, unused dialogue suggests House had contingency plans to use nerve gas on Freeside if the population became too problematic, and had also been conducting unauthorized experiments on some Vegas residents to extend his life extension technology. His famous line about saving humanity was apparently going to be undercut by his willingness to sacrifice thousands of statistical irrelevancies to achieve his vision, making the choice between him, NCR, and Legion far more uncomfortable than it already is. Fallout 2's talking Deathclaws were based on obscure 1950s sci-fi. The intelligent, talking Deathclaws in Fallout 2, specifically those in Vault 13, were a deliberate homage to the 1950s era science fiction trope of uplifted animals, particularly from stories in magazines like Astounding Science Fiction. The lead writer later expressed regret about their inclusion, feeling they veered too far into whimsy and undermined the horror Deathclaws represented. However, their creation has an in-universe explanation that's easy to miss. They were engineered by the Enclave before the Master's experiments, using a combination of FEV and targeted genetic manipulation to create controllable super soldiers. The Vault 13 Deathclaws were specifically modified to possess human-level intelligence and speech capability. Their tragic fate, being massacred by Frank Horrigan and the Enclave, was meant to represent the destruction of innocence and the failure of forced evolution. Interestingly, the Deathclaw named Gorus, if kept alive, has unique dialogue in San Francisco, suggesting the talking Deathclaws had developed their own philosophy and culture in just a single generation. The Dunwich Building's Lovecraftian connections run deeper than you think. The Dunwich Building in Fallout 3 and the Dunwich Borers in Fallout 4 are direct references to H.P. Lovecraft's The Dunwich Horror, but the connections are far more elaborate than just the name. Throughout both locations, you'll find references to an entity called UG Qualtoth, which appears to be a pre-war cult deity that somehow survived or transcended the nuclear apocalypse. The Kriv Beknir, an indestructible occult book found in both games, contains text that's actually written in a cipher. When decoded, it reveals incantations and references to dark rituals that predate the Great War by centuries. What most players miss is that the hallucinations you experience in these locations may not be hallucinations at all. Terminals in the Dunwich Borers reveal that excavations unearthed a statue estimated to be over 4,000 years old, and workers began experiencing violent psychotic episodes. The implication is that the Fallout universe contains genuine supernatural elements that exist independently of radiation or FEV, suggesting that eldritch horrors were always lurking beneath the surface of this retro-futuristic world. Fallout's original ending was going to let you side with the Master. In the original Fallout, the developers scripted but never fully implemented an ending where you could actually join the Master and help him continue his super mutant conversion campaign. This ending would have required extremely high intelligence and science skills to fully understand the Master's vision, plus passing several speech checks to convince him you genuinely believed in unity. The ending slides would have shown your character becoming a lieutenant in the Master's army, with the Vault Dweller narrating how they came to believe that pure humanity was doomed and that forced evolution was the only salvation. What's particularly dark about this cut content is that it included branching paths where you could either genuinely believe in the Master's vision or secretly work to undermine it from within over decades. The developers cut this ending because they felt it was too morally reprehensible to allow players to commit genocide, even in a role-playing game, and also because it would have required an entirely separate set of ending slides and artwork they didn't have time to create. References to this choice still exist in the game's code, and some modders have partially restored the dialogue trees. The Sierra Madre casino chips are actually impossible to forge for a brilliant reason. In the Dead Money DLC for Fallout New Vegas, the Sierra Madre casino chips appear to be a simple pre-war currency, but they represent one of the most sophisticated pieces of technology in the entire Fallout universe. These chips are made with a unique combination of rare earth elements and also polymer developed by Big MT that makes them literally impossible to replicate with any wasteland or even pre-war technology outside the Sierra Madre itself. The vending machines that accept them contain molecular scanners that verify not just the composition, but also the quantum signature of each individual chip, making counterfeiting theoretically impossible. This is why Dean Domino spent centuries trying to break into the vault, rather than simply duplicating the chips. He knew it just couldn't be done. The tragic irony is that Frederick Sinclair, who commissioned this unbreakable currency system, did so to ensure his beloved Vera Reyes couldn't be exploited by gold diggers or con artists. But this same obsessive security turned the Sierra Madre into an inescapable death trap. The chips you leave the DLC with are genuine, and their limited number represents the finite nature of pre-war perfection. You can't make more. You can only spend what's left. Fallout Tactics Calculator was inspired by a real Cold War AI project. The main antagonist of Fallout Tactics, Brotherhood of Steel, is the Calculator, a rogue AI controlling an army of robots from a secret vault. What many fans don't know is that this character was partially inspired by a real Cold War project called SAGE, being the semi-automatic ground environment, a massive air defense computer system that was, at one point, seriously discussed as a potential fully automated nuclear response system. The Calculator's backstory, being a military AI designed to rebuild America after nuclear war by networking with other installations, mirrors actual 1950s and 1960s proposals for automated civilization reconstruction systems. In the game's lore, the Calculator went insane after its human staff died, leaving it to fulfill its directives without human context or compassion. The various endings where you can merge with, destroy, or even reprogram the Calculator reflect contemporary debates in the 1950s about whether machines could or should ever be trusted with human survival. The good ending, where you merge your consciousness with it to provide humanity and restraint, was actually inspired by Arthur C. Clarke's The City and the Stars, where human consciousness preserved in machines becomes the guardian of future civilizations. The mysterious UFO crash sites connect all modern Fallout games. Starting with Fallout 3, every modern Fallout game has featured a UFO crash site with a dead alien and also a unique weapon. But these aren't just Easter eggs. They're part of a larger narrative thread that most players never connect. If you collect all the alien recordings from Fallout 3's Mothership Zeta DLC, Fallout 4's crashed UFO, Fallout 76's various alien encounters, and piece together the terminal entries, a story emerges. The aliens have been observing and occasionally abducting humans since before the Great War, and their increased crash frequency suggests their technology is failing. In Fallout 4, there's a terminal in the Institute that references extraterrestrial signals being detected far more frequently, and mentions previous attempts to study non-terrestrial biological entities in partnership with the pre-war government. What's truly bizarre is that in Fallout 76, there are environmental storytelling elements suggesting the aliens were actually trying to stop the Great War. One of their observation posts contains equipment apparently designed to jam nuclear launch signals. The implication is that these aliens weren't hostile invaders, but rather observers who tried and failed to prevent humanity's self-destruction, and are now stranded in a world they tried to save. Harold the Ghoul's journey across games represents Fallout's shifting identity. Harold, who is the mutated FEV victim with a tree growing from his head, appears in Fallout 1, Fallout 2, and also Fallout 3. But his evolution across these games perfectly mirrors the series' own transformation. In Fallout 1, Harold is a tragic figure at the hub, a caravan merchant mutated by the Master's FEV, who provides dark comic relief while mourning his lost humanity. In Fallout 2, he's traveled east and grown more philosophical, with Herbert, his head tree, becoming more prominent and their bickering friendship deepening. But in Fallout 3, Bethesda transformed him into Bob, a literal god figure worshipped by tree minders, now rooted in place and begging for death after centuries of growth. This progression from wandering merchant to a mobile deity represents Fallout's shift from a game about individual survival in a harsh world to one about mythological rebirth and transformation. The controversy over Harold's Fallout 3 appearance, with fans debating whether killing him is mercy or murder, reflects larger community debates about whether Bethesda killed the real Fallout spirit or allowed it to grow into something new. That Harold's final wish is for death, regardless of your choice, suggests even the writers recognize they've taken this character as far as he could go. Harold literally cannot appear in any future Fallout game, making him a permanent monument to the series' transition from Interplay to Bethesda. Fallout 1's world map contains locations that no longer exist in canon. Several settlements shown on the original Fallout 1 overworld map were quietly removed from later lore, never mentioned again in sequels or terminals. Developers later admitted some locations were placeholders that accidentally shipped. In-universe, this implies entire communities may have risen and vanished without a trace, reinforcing the idea that most post-war stories are lost forever. The Master's original voice was recorded twice because the first version was too sympathetic. Early recordings made the Master sound calm and almost comforting, which testers found disturbing in the wrong way. Developers wanted horror, not reassurance, so they layered multiple distorted voices to create the unsettling final performance. This is why the Master sounds like several people speaking at once, because he literally is. Fallout 2 tracks your intelligence level more aggressively than any other game. Low intelligence dialogue in Fallout 2 isn't just simplified. Entire quest lines become inaccessible, and NPCs permanently lose respect for you. Some companions will even refuse to follow you if your intelligence drops way too low. This system was largely abandoned later because it locked too much content away from players. The original Brotherhood of Steel was never meant to be heroic. In Fallout 1 design documents, the Brotherhood was described as technology hoarders bordering on cult behavior. Their isolationism was meant to be a warning about stagnation, not strength. Later games softened them to give players a reliable faction, but their roots are intentionally morally cold. Fallout's ghouls were originally immune to radiation sickness and starvation. Early design drafts made ghouls biologically immortal unless physically destroyed. This was removed because it raised uncomfortable implications about eternal suffering, especially for feral ghouls trapped in ruins. The final lore leaves their aging ambiguous on purpose. The Pit-Boy's green screen wasn't an aesthetic choice. Green monochrome displays were chosen because early CRT screens used that color for maximum readability and the lowest eye strain. Fallout's designers specifically referenced military terminals from decommissioned bunkers. The result is a UI that feels authentically uncomfortable, not stylish. Fallout 3's metro tunnels were designed to induce anxiety. Developers intentionally lowered ceilings, increased echo, and reduced ambient music to simulate claustrophobia. Enemy placement was staggered, so players rarely felt safe. The metro system isn't just a shortcut, it's psychological warfare. The Lone Wanderer is technically illiterate at the start of Fallout 3. Early Vault terminals suggest that most residents relied on voice-assisted learning and automation. Reading comprehension wasn't prioritized. This is why early skill books feel narratively important. You're teaching yourself how the world works. The Brotherhood outcasts were meant to replace the Enclave. During Fallout 3 development, Bethesda debated removing the Enclave entirely. The outcasts were designed as a morally grey, technological faction to fill that role. The Enclave remained only after late-stage rewrites. Fallout New Vegas intentionally avoids a true ending. Every ending is designed to contain long-term consequences that destabilize the region. Even the most optimistic conclusions include resource shortages, unrest, or authoritarian creep. Obsidian wanted players to feel that power always costs something. Caesar's Legion armor is historically inaccurate on purpose. The Legion mixes Roman aesthetics from wildly different eras that never coexisted. This reflects Caesar's flawed understanding of history. He's copying symbols, not values. His empire is built on imitation, not knowledge. New Vegas tracks how often you kill non-hostile NPCs. Hidden reputation modifiers quietly adjust how factions perceive you long-term. Even if no one sees the murder, the game remembers. This creates subtle hostility shifts players often blame on bugs. Mr. House's lifespan projection was wrong. Terminal entries reveal House expected to survive centuries longer than he does. His systems degraded faster than predicted due to micro-radiation damage. Even the smartest man in the wasteland miscalculated time. The strip's neon lighting serves a gameplay function. The lighting color temperature changes slightly depending on your faction alignment. It's nearly imperceptible, but affects mood subconsciously. This was an experiment in environmental storytelling, rarely repeated. Fallout 4's settlement AI simulates depression. Settlers lose productivity when beds are too close together or lighting is poor. Happiness drops faster at night than during the day. These systems exist even if you never open the settlement menu. Diamond City's wall is made from a real aircraft carrier class. The wrecked ship forming the city wall resembles a scaled-down Essex-class carrier. Bethesda used real schematics to sell the illusion. It's one of the most structurally accurate ruins in the whole entire game. Synth memory wipes are imperfect by design. Institute terminals admit that emotional residue survives erasure. This is why some synth experience dreams or déjà vu. The Institute knows this and ignores it. Nick Valentine's personality drift is canon. Over time, Nick becomes less like the original detective and more like himself. This wasn't actually planned. It's a side effect of memory layering. The Institute considers him a failed prototype. Fallout 4's opening sequence hides multiple timeline contradictions. Dates on newspapers, TVs, and terminals don't align perfectly. This was intentional to suggest unreliable pre-war records. History itself is fragmented. Vault 95 was sabotaged by its own overseer early. Logs reveal the overseer began altering experiment parameters before Vault Tech authorized it. He believed the test was unethical and tried to break it quietly. Unfortunately, he failed. Fallout 76's empty launch world was always the plan. The absence of NPCs was meant to force environmental storytelling. Bethesda underestimated how uncomfortable that silence would feel. Later NPCs were added without retconning the loneliness. The Scorched communicate through sound frequencies. Audio files reveal they emit high-frequency signals to coordinate attacks. This is why they sometimes sense players without line of sight. They're not dumb, they're networked. The White Spring Bunker predates the Enclave name. Internal documents show the faction existed before adopting its identity. Enclave was branding, not origin. Power came first, ideology later. Fallout's robots suffer from data rot. Many robotic enemies attack because corrupted logic loops misidentify humans as threats. They aren't evil, they're just broken. This mirrors real-world AI degradation fears. Protectrons were never meant to walk freely. They were designed for fixed patrol routes. Free-roaming behavior is a post-war malfunction. Every wandering Protectron is essentially lost. Fallout's wildlife population shouldn't exist, and the games know it. Terminal entries acknowledge ecological collapse. Many species survive only due to accelerated mutation cycles. The world is running on borrowed time. Radstorms shorten human lifespans canonically. Even light exposure accumulates cellular damage. Characters who travel frequently are expected to die younger. This is why long-lived NPCs are quite rare in the games. The Brotherhood's airships are logistical nightmares. Fuel, maintenance, and crew attrition make them unsustainable. The Pridewen is a symbol, not a strategy. Its destruction is statistically inevitable. Fallout's medicine is dangerously unregulated. Stim packs cause tissue scarring with repeated use. Doctors know this, and they still don't warn you. Survival overrides long-term health. The wasteland silence is artificial. Audio designers intentionally removed natural ambient sounds like insects. The world feels dead because it literally is. When you hear birds, something is wrong. Fallout 1's time limit wasn't about pressure. It was about failure. Developers wanted players to experience loss from inaction. Entire towns can die without you ever knowing why. This philosophy shaped the franchise's bleak tone. The vaults created more suffering than the bombs. Statistically, more people died due to vault experiments than initial nuclear blasts. Fallout is a story about control, not war. The apocalypse was managed. Fallout endings are generated using modular slide systems. Starting with Fallout 1, the ending slides are not a single cinematic, but a series of condition-checked outcomes triggered by hidden variables. This allows settlements you barely interacted with to still receive an ending, meaning your indirect actions can permanently shape locations you never revisit. Fallout 2 tracks how many days pass before certain towns become doomed. Some locations begin failing the moment the game starts, regardless of player involvement. If you arrive too late, entire quest lines become impossible without explanation, reinforcing the idea that the world doesn't wait for the player. Fallout New Vegas contains faction fail-states that lock endings early. If you commit specific actions, even unintentionally, certain endings become permanently inaccessible long before the final. The game does not warn you when this happens, and most players never realize they've closed narrative doors. Fallout 3's karma system secretly influences random encounters. Beyond dialogue and companion reactions, karma affects which random encounters spawn in the wasteland. Some encounters can only occur if your moral alignment reaches extreme thresholds. Fallout 4's dialogue camera subtly shifts based on confidence checks. Successful charisma-based dialogue causes the camera to push slightly closer to NPCs, while failures pull it back. This visual cue was meant to subconsciously reinforce social dominance or failure. Fallout New Vegas records how often you use disguises. Repeated disguise use alters faction suspicion values, making NPCs more likely to search or confront you, even when wearing the correct outfit. This system exists entirely behind the scenes. Fallout 3 contains unused terminal entries explaining Vault-Tech's post-war plan. Cut files reveal Vault-Tech intended to reconsolidate control after surface conditions stabilized, reclaiming all of the Vault populations. The plan never activates in-game, suggesting Vault-Tech collapsed earlier than expected. Fallout 4 settlers remember player behavior patterns. NPCs track whether you help immediately or delay aid, affecting future dialogue tone and trust values. This memory persists across long play sessions and settlement changes. Fallout 76 dynamically adjusts enemy density based on server survival rates. Early back-end systems increased enemy aggression if players were surviving too easily in certain regions. This made Appalachia feel more hostile without direct difficulty sliders. Fallout's companion affinity decay can be permanent. If affinity drops too far with certain companions, they may never return to neutral status, even if you later act favorably. This reflects long-term trust damage rather than momentary disapproval. Fallout 1's main quest can fail without a game over screen. If critical events occur off-screen, the game simply continues until an ending slide explains your failure. Players can unknowingly doom humanity hours before realizing it. In the first Fallout's behind-the-scenes lore, it was actually the Chinese who launched the first nuclear strike. A US violation of a biological weapons treaty provoked them, according to lead designer Tim Kaine. This isn't directly stated in-game, but Kaine confirmed it as part of the internal backstory. China nuked first, then global retaliation followed. This bit of lore adds a darker, political dimension to the world of Fallout. In the design phase of the original Fallout, the vault suits, those iconic jumpsuits with numbers on the back, were conceived to be extruded by a machine to accommodate every body type across generations. The numbers on the backs of the suits were part of that notion. They were, in design intent, a mass-produced product. This neat idea never made it into explicit in-game explanation, but the visual cues do remain. Those fictional sugar bombs in the Fallout universe? Tim Kaine revealed that the concept was inspired by the comic strip Calvin and Hobbes. While sugar bombs first appear in Fallout 3, the idea goes back to the original game's design discussions, even though they didn't make it until later. A sweet little piece of meta pop culture. Before the creators settled on the nuclear wasteland theme, they toyed with more traditional fantasy RPG settings, such as swords and sorcery, and even a time-traveling dinosaurs concept. Eventually, they chose to lean into atomic-era retrofuturism. It's an interesting what might have been for the Fallout series. The original Fallout was designed as a spiritual successor to Wasteland 1988, because the team couldn't secure the rights to a direct sequel. Many of the mechanics, motifs, and tone echo that earlier game. The lineage adds depth for fans who trace RPG history. In the Fallout games, players can tip over Brahmin, the two-headed cattle, in most entries, such as Fallout 2 using a push command, and Fallout 3 and New Vegas by sneaking up and interacting. But that mechanic was conspicuously missing in Fallout 4. A seemingly trivial detail, but one that delights the attentive player. The special targeting system in Fallout 3, being the VATS system, allowing you to target specific body parts in slow motion, was inspired by crash modes in the Burnout racing games, a surprising cross-genre influence. Before Bethesda took over the series, the codename for what would become Fallout 3 was Van Buren, an isometric RPG in the style of the first two games. That version was cancelled, and the franchise shifted to the 3D open-world format we know today. In the Fallout timeline, nuclear bombs fell on the 23rd of October. The year depends on the game, a date that the developers attempted to echo by planning release dates that align. For example, Fallout 3's release date was targeted to coincide with that lore date. The Wasteland is full of hidden nods. For example, in Fallout 2, you can find a smashed sperm whale and a pot of petunias, a clear reference to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. In the original Fallout, there's a homage to the TARDIS from Doctor Who. These details reward deep exploration. In Fallout 3, the drug Med-X stands in for morphine, or drugs more broadly. In Australia, the real-world drug connection initially caused issues, so Bethesda changed the name to Med-X globally to avoid regulatory complications. A small change with large implications. In Fallout New Vegas, there's a memorial wall at Boulder City, whose names many assumed were the developers. In fact, they're fictional characters, some of whom tie back to earlier Fallout lore. For example, Roger Weston III is connected to a character from Fallout 2, a subtle nod for lore-obsessed fans. In Fallout New Vegas concept art, the woman pictured in a Vault 34 jumpsuit in marketing wallpapers ended up being the Boomers' leader, Pearl, shown as a young woman. Only later this was revealed, meaning the artwork contained extra lore not obvious at first glance. Interestingly, the very first piece of art created for Fallout 3, in 2004, by lead artist Istvan Peli, was the picture of the power armor that would become the game cover. It shows how central the power armor concept was to the identity of the game from early on. While many companions appear in some Fallout titles, the canine companion Dogmeat is arguably the only character to appear, in some sort of form, across nearly every major entry. That continuity adds a subtle thread of emotional consistency across the wasteland. While it's widely understood that Vault-Tec's vaults were social experiments, in early design documents, there was the notion that vaults were intended to reduce population or filter undesirables in the wake of nuclear war. Some of the atmospheric hints in the game suggest this darker purpose without spelling it out, less openly documented, but widely referenced in dev interviews and also fan lore. In Megatron from Fallout 3, there lies a nuclear bomb at the town center. There's a skeleton underneath that bomb rigging, and if you examine it carefully, the pose suggests the person may have died before the town was built. It's a minor environmental story beat, someone there early. Fans note this, but it's not explicitly narrated. Brahmin, the mutant cattle, are named for pairings of two names. For example, Bessie and Elsie, nodding to the fact that they're two-headed. In Fallout lore, this naming scheme is rarely explained, but you'll see it if you explore minor settlement logs and workbenches. In Fallout New Vegas, the in-fiction soda brand Sunset Sarsaparilla had an ambitious real-world promotional web video that was planned but never fully released. Some of the assets remain in the game files via data mines, but many players don't know about the Cook campaign. In multiple Fallout maps, you'll find bomb craters whose size doesn't match the lore blast radius described in terminals or logs. Some community modders believe this was a level design necessity, but for players, it creates odd visual discontinuities if you pay attention. The Fallout world sometimes uses RADS, radiation absorption dose, and other times uses Roentgens for older measurement. For example, some logs in Fallout 3 refer to Roentgen, despite RADS being the in-game unit. Suggests a shifting standard in the lore technology. Within the lore of certain vaults, unsanctioned experiments took place. Some vaults were intentionally locked and the residents died inside. The game doesn't always show the full documentation, but if you dig into terminal lore, you'll find hints of vaults built simply to be sealed. Many terminals refer to a master record database of Vault-Tec experiments and population statistics. In nearly all games, the actual master record isn't accessible. This creates a sense of mystery, as if huge data was lost in the apocalypse. While super mutants in Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout 4 may look similar, if you examine region-specific logs, you'll find that their genetic origin differs. For example, West Coast mutants resulted from FEV experiments by the Enclave, East Coast in Fallout 3 from different sources. This cross-regional variation is subtle and often overlooked. In the Boomers B-29 bomber base in Fallout New Vegas, the end slide background artwork includes little Easter eggs. On the side of the bomber, you'll find a small name called Pearl's Pride, referencing the Boomers leader's earlier name reveal. Fans spotted it years later. In the Fallout setting, many weapons are legacy models from pre-war companies, such as Robco, for example. But in gameplay, you'll find weapons invented just for the game that have no in-law manufacturer. This mismatch is rarely discussed by players, but adds a subtle inconsistency for lore purists. In certain Fallout 3 mods and community findings, players discovered that companions had hidden alternate dialogue lines tied to early build versions of the game, accessible if you reload an older save with changed flags. These lines reference concepts cut before release, for example, alternative motivations. In Fallout 4, the interior model for Vault 88 Industrial Sector appears to reuse assets originally built for a cancelled DLC set piece. The art style slightly mismatches the clean Vault aesthetic, hinting at the change in plan mid-development. The forced evolutionary virus is central to the lore of mutants, but in early design documents, its placeholder name was Project Genesis 2. This old name still exists in some game file comments, though not exposed to players. A community data mine suggests that the large red scorpion creature in New Vegas was originally envisioned as a mid-boss in the cancelled sequel to Fallout Tactics: Brotherhood of Steel, but then repurposed. While not officially confirmed, the matching model names in the files hint at this. In Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, NPCs that seem unique have been found to share the same face rig/model with other minor NPCs, meaning the developers reused assets more than many players assumed. This gives a subtle clone feel if you pay attention, especially on replays of the game. The original Vault Dweller quest in Fallout 1997 is to find a computer chip to fix the water purification system of the Vault. This storyline mirrors real-world atomic age fears about infrastructure decay and budget cuts. The developers intentionally crafted this metaphor, though most players just see, "get the chip." In some early builds of Fallout 3, such as the leak casting script, etc., there was a perk called Archaeologist for giving fully fledged solutions to problems. But in the final game, this was cut or replaced by simpler dialogue choices. In Fallout lore, the company Robco Industries produces the Pit-Boy and lots of robotics. there is an internal in-game memo referencing tomorrow's tomorrow, more like the promise of Disneyland's Tomorrowland. This sort of meta-reference is easy to miss unless you read every terminal. In the Fallout universe, the pre-war calendar uses new text as standard in some logs, capital calendar in other logs, suggesting that regional governments maintain distinct time zones and calendars even before the war. This subtle detail appears in minor terminals and hasn't been widely documented. The cheerful Vault Boy mascot and his simple animations echo 1950s era civil defense instructional films such as Duck and Cover and Radiation Survival. The development team intentionally referenced those styles to heighten the unsettling contrast between cheerful propaganda and nuclear devastation. There is a lesser-known exploit in New Vegas's Boomer's questline. If you kill the bomb technician, being Pearl's lieutenant, early on, the B-29 bomber remains grounded permanently. The mission changes subtly, and many players don't know this alters late-game outcomes. Some terminals reference bottle crowns, which was a pre-war British-style coin, in regions that we don't typically play in. This is an odd relic of a world design ambition to simulate globally diverse economy, though most players never see those logs. In the lore of Fallout, especially in the first game's terminals, there are references to power armor Mark I prototypes developed in the 22nd century, prior to the Great War. But almost none of that gear survives in-game. It hints at a richer, pre-war military history. A subtle environmental design change was the Mojave Express van near Prim has bullet vantage that lines up with the upper window of the Prim Visitor Center. Level designers placed this intentionally to hint at an earlier boss fight. Many players just see the van, but few notice the alignment. In Fallout 3, the achievement Family Reunion for reuniting with your father initially required an extra dialogue branch in internal builds, which was later cut to simplify branching. Data mine notes show the original condition. The change is invisible to most players, but interesting for completionists. Some NPC names are subtle references. For example, a character named Trinity in a Vault terminal is a nod to the Trinity nuclear test site. The developers peppered these references throughout the games, often in offhand lines. While Brahmin tipping is more widely referenced, in Fallout 2, the push command would knock them over, and they'd slowly get back up. This mechanic was removed in later entries, but it remains a quirky early inclusion. There are music tracks in Fallout 3's files labeled Vault Theme Alt or Radstorm Loop 2 that players discovered via modding tools. They never play during normal gameplay, but they hint at scenes or ambience the designers may have planned but then cut. The phrase War Never Changes predates Fallout's actual first game release. And though this phrase is strongly associated with Fallout, especially the narration, parts of the team claim the War Never Changes line was part of pre-production design discussions before the first game launched. It became a series signature. The classic "Please stand by" blue screen with the countdown used in loading screens and advertising is derived from fictional Vault-Tec public service announcements that were meant in lore to reassure citizens during the early Bombsfall era. It's an example of meta design bleeding into gameplay. Actor Will Wheaton voices the Robo-Brains in Old World Blues from the Fallout New Vegas DLC. But some datamine fans have found additional unused lines intended for other Robo-Brain models that didn't appear in the release version. The mission title in Fallout 4, Kid in a Fridge, where you rescue the super mutant child, draws inspiration from the real-world quirky pop culture moments of people hiding in fridges during nuclear blasts, and this was referenced in the Fallout TV show Easter egg discussions. If you explore multiple vaults across Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout 4, you'll notice the same basic floor plan, from the corridor to the atrium to the living quarters. These reappear with only cosmetic changes. This reuse is economical for developers, but also gives a subtle familiarity across vaults. Many players don't notice until multiple playthroughs. In the files of the games, certain mutant creature models are named after Cold War operations. For example, Operation Red Eye Beast or Project Silver Fox Mutant, suggesting that the lore team planted these names to hint at pre-war secret programs. While seldom visible in-game, they add hidden texture. The Vault-Tec logo was designed to look optimistic, on purpose. Developers wanted players to feel uneasy when they saw it, realizing that the bright, smiling imagery was propaganda masking the horrors of experimentation. It's one of gaming's earliest examples of cheerful dystopia, branding done intentionally. Vault 11's story is based on a real psychological experiment. Its moral sacrifice system mirrors studies in which participants were forced to choose one person to die for the group's survival. Bethesda expanded it into a narrative that explores guilt and societal corruption, all hidden beneath cheerful 1950s posters. Fallout's special system was inspired by children's educational videos. The perk cards and mascot style come from mid-century American PSAs that taught kids about safety, manners, and nutrition, a dark twist on innocence corrupted by nuclear war. The name Nuka-Cola was chosen before the lore was written. Developers liked how Nuka sounded futuristic and Cola nostalgic. Only afterward did they design a retro corporate empire around it, complete with lawsuits, rival companies, and a flavor for every mutation. Fallout's wasteland maps are loosely geographically accurate. If you overlay Fallout's map over real-world terrain, mountain ranges and city ruins line up surprisingly well. Developers used actual US geological data when building the world layouts. Mr. Handy's voice was inspired by 1950s butlers in radio dramas. The tone was chosen to reflect servitude mixed with cold, programmed detachment, a relic of an America that replaced warmth with automation. In Fallout 4, Codsworth can actually say over 900 real player names. Developers recorded countless variations, but stopped at around 900 after realizing how much disk space it was taking. They prioritized names that were statistically most common. Super mutants' physiology was written like real biology. Developers imagined how the forced evolutionary virus would rewrite DNA, thickening bone, increasing muscle, but damaging neural tissue. That's why most mutants are strong, but cognitively impaired. The Brotherhood of Steel's armor isn't truly airtight. According to lore, early power armor models leaked radiation through weak joints. That's why training is so strict. Unskilled users risk irradiation even while protected. Fallout's original developers were obsessed with future nostalgia. They wanted the 2077 America to feel like a 1950s future that never moved on. All chrome and cheer masking existential dread. That's why technology advanced, but culture froze. The Vault Boy's thumbs up pose isn't what you think. He's not being cheerful. He's measuring a mushroom cloud. If your thumb covers the blast when held up at arm's length, you're outside the immediate kill zone. Vault 87's experiments accidentally created the super mutants. The scientists were trying to make soldiers. They were testing forced evolution for radiation resistance. The result was monstrous strength, but catastrophic mental decay. The Enclave's anthem was modeled on US military recruitment ads. The goal was to make them sound patriotic, even heroic, until you realize they're fascists hiding behind the flag. Bethesda wanted players to feel conflicted hearing it. The GOAT exam in Fallout 3 references old career tests. It mocks real-world aptitude tests given to teenagers in the 1950s, which often decided your career path with no say from you. In Vault 101, the system literally defines your destiny. Fallout 2 has an unused encounter with ghost citizens. In the game files, there's an entire cut location featuring translucent NPCs who reference the end of reality. Developers scrapped it because it clashed with the grounded tone, but the dialogue still exists. The Pip-Boy's design never changed because of branding. Bethesda considered modernizing it, but decided the chunky CRT look was essential to Fallout's identity, like a relic that refuses to evolve. Dogmeat's name predates Fallout 1. It comes from the 1979 movie A Boy and His Dog, one of the key inspirations for Fallout's tone and world. The protagonist's canine companion was also named Dogmeat. There's a terminal in Fallout New Vegas that admits NCR propaganda is fake. It reveals that many official stories of heroism are rewritten to keep morale high. It's a subtle jab at post-war government spin doctoring. The Fat Man launcher was based on an actual US prototype. The Davy Crockett was a real Cold War mini-nuke launcher capable of being fired by one soldier, something Fallout exaggerated only slightly. Deathclaws were originally designed as lab-grown guard animals. They were created from chameleon DNA to replace military attack dogs. Over time, with no human control, they adapted, becoming apex predators of the wasteland. Vault-Tec deliberately made vaults fail. Most weren't meant to protect people. They were psychological and social experiments. Only a few, like Vault 8, actually worked as intended. The Radiation King TV brand appears in every Fallout game. It's a fictional electronics manufacturer that somehow survived in every major ruin, a running gag that suggests it may have been secretly tied to Vault-Tec. Fallout 4's synths question identity and humanity. Their memories and emotions are so advanced that some can't tell if they're real. The game's philosophical undertone mirrors questions raised by Blade Runner. Fallout 76's map is the largest ever created in the series. It's over 4 times bigger than Fallout 4's Commonwealth, filled with real West Virginia landmarks like the Mothman Museum and Camden Park, faithfully recreated in ruined form. The Vault Boy and Vault Girl were drawn by one artist in a single night. Bethesda legend claims that the original artist, Leonard Boyarsky, sketched both as simple doodles. The simplicity made them timeless and endlessly adaptable for perk icons. Nuka-Cola Quantum's glow is canonically radioactive. The glow comes from an additive called isotope C13, which gives it its neon color. Drinking too much theoretically gives you mild radiation poisoning. The Great War lasted just 2 hours. The entire apocalypse, all nuclear detonations worldwide, happened in 120 minutes. The rest of Fallout's history spans the next 200 years of humanity trying to rebuild. The Institute was inspired by MIT. Even the underground campus layout mirrors real MIT buildings. The idea was to contrast scientific progress with moral decay, progress without humanity. The NCR's flag has a hidden meaning. The two-headed bear represents California's strength divided, democracy, and militarism fighting within one nation. Over time, the militaristic head wins. Fallout 3's radio DJ 3 Dog is based on a real DJ. He's inspired by Wolfman Jack, a counterculture icon who broadcast outlaw music and anti-establishment rants during the 1960s. Fallout New Vegas' Caesar is a history nerd. Before the war, he was a translator and scholar named Edward Sallow. His obsession with ancient Rome became a delusion of empire once civilization collapsed. The glowing ghouls aren't actually undead, they're living humans. Their bodies have been mutated beyond recognition, but they're biologically alive. Some still remember their lives before the bombs. The Lonesome Road DLC has 2 different ending narrations based on your choices. The voice actor recorded over an hour of branching monologue to account for player morality, a record for any Fallout DLC. Fallout 81 scientists accidentally created a cure for all diseases. They were testing a universal virus to study how infection spread, but it evolved into a cure-all compound. The moral? Science saves people only when used selflessly. Fallout's wasteland wildlife has logical mutations. For instance, rad roaches evolved exoskeletons thicker than concrete, while bloat-5s developed acid glands, both realistic long-term radiation adaptations. Fallout New Vegas' Yes Man is the only AI you can truly trust. He's coded to agree with every command, making him incapable of betrayal. A subtle commentary on blind obedience as safety. The Vault 108 Gary clones are a reference to bad lab management. The experiment was meant to test cloning technology, but lacked oversight. Each new Gary became more violent than the last, until only chaos remained. Bethesda originally planned to make Fallout 4's map cover Boston and Providence. They scrapped the Rhode Island expansion when it proved too resource heavy. Remnants of it still exist in the game files. Fallout's bottle caps were meant to represent decentralization. They symbolize how society rebuilds around scarcity and nostalgia. People literally reusing trash to create order. The vaults have secret connections underground. According to hidden terminal entries, several vaults were linked by tunnels used for observation and data transfer, something no game has yet fully explored. The Children of Atom religion started as a developer joke. During early Fallout 3 writing sessions, one writer sarcastically suggested people who worship nukes. The team ran with it, crafting a tragic commentary on faith twisted by radiation and trauma. Vault 12's door was deliberately designed to fail. It never sealed properly, exposing residents to radiation that slowly transformed them into ghouls. Those survivors eventually became the citizens of Necropolis in Fallout 1. Nuka World was originally pitched as its own standalone game. Bethesda considered making it a dark theme park RPG, before deciding to turn it into Fallout 4's final DLC instead. Many of its rides and mascots were originally part of an amusement management sim. Fallout's wasteland roots are literal. The original Fallout was developed as a spiritual successor to Wasteland from 1988. When Interplay couldn't get the Wasteland rights back, they simply built a new universe, one even bleaker. Fallout New Vegas was made in just 18 months. Obsidian had less than 2 years to create a fully functioning RPG with multiple endings, hundreds of quests, and branching dialogue. A near impossible task that fans still hail as a masterpiece. Power armor is older than the Great War. Lore reveals it was first deployed in 2067, a full decade before the bombs fell. That means the world was already on the brink of apocalypse long before nuclear fire. You can find the original Fallout 3 Van Buren storyline hidden in New Vegas. Several characters, like Caesar and Joshua Graham, were lifted directly from Van Buren concepts that Obsidian resurrected when they got to make New Vegas. Fallout's currency, pre-war money, never truly became worthless. Because it's made of high-quality linen and ink, it's often used as insulation or crafting material in post-war settlements. Even in the apocalypse, capitalism leaves its paper trail. The mysterious stranger perk was inspired by film noir tropes. Writers loved the idea of a trenchcoat vigilante who appears out of nowhere, part angel, part gunslinger, and disappears without a trace. The stranger's identity remains purposely unknown. Fallout 76's Scorched Plague was created to explain multiplayer logic. Bethesda needed a lore reason for endless respawning enemies, so they invented a parasitic plague that reawakens the infected. It tied gameplay to lore elegantly. The entire Fallout timeline is technically an alternate reality. In Fallout's world, technology advanced faster, but culture stagnated after the 1950s, creating a retro-futuristic America where optimism never evolved into modernism. Liberty Prime's voice lines were written to parody propaganda. Phrases like "democracy is non-negotiable" mock Cold War jingoism while still sounding heroic, showing how even machines parrot ideology. The music in Fallout isn't random, it's historically curated. Every 1930s to 1950s track was chosen to contrast cheerful lyrics with desolate landscapes. For instance, "I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire" is literally about self-destruction through love. Fallout Tactics has a canon ending that few players know. In official lore, the Brotherhood of Steel from that game survives and evolves into a Midwestern faction that later reconnects with the West Coast Brotherhood decades later. The Pip-Boy 3000 is not a consumer product. Lore documents describe it as an experimental military tool mass-produced for Vault-Tec's internal staff. That means most Vault dwellers wouldn't have had one. Vault-Tec scientists never actually lived in the vaults they designed. They were stationed in remote observation bunkers, watching experiments unfold through hidden systems. Some of their descendants are implied to still be alive underground. Fallout 4's protagonist, Nate or Nora, is the only Fallout main character with a canon spouse and child. This was controversial internally. Bethesda debated for months whether giving the player a family weakened the lone wanderer tone. The glow from Fallout 1 is based on a real nuclear test site. Developers modeled it after the Nevada test site, a place filled with decaying tech and irradiated bunkers. The eerie glow was inspired by actual photos of Fallout zones at night. You can still find classic Fallout 1 terminals in Fallout 4. Some terminals in the glowing sea use the same UI font and interface from the original 1997 game, preserved as an intentional homage. The followers of the Apocalypse were originally villains. In early drafts, they were meant to be a cult of scientists hoarding knowledge. Later, writers reimagined them as altruistic scholars trying to rebuild civilization. In Fallout 1997, the player could encounter a random event where a group of developers, including Tim Kaine, appear in-game as NPCs. Kaine himself carries an incredibly powerful .223 pistol prototype, which was actually based on Deckard's gun from Blade Runner. This weapon, later standardized, became one of the strongest sidearms in the early Fallout canon. Black Isle Studios originally considered removing the talking head animations because they were time-consuming to produce and ate into storage. However, they were kept due to their ability to make dialogue more immersive. Fallout 2 reduced their number drastically, making them feel more special. Only 13 exist in the entire game. Harold, the ghoul with a tree growing out of his head, was originally planned to die permanently in Fallout 2. Developers cut this after community feedback suggested Harold had become a mascot for Fallout, beloved for his humor and tragic backstory. He survived all the way to Fallout 3, where he finally met his end. Early concept art and design documents for Fallout 3 included a working motorcycle that could be repaired, upgraded, and ridden across the capital wasteland. It was scrapped due to world streaming limitations and the unpredictability of vehicle physics in Bethesda's engine, but modders later revived the idea. The Enclave was chosen as the faction's name because it suggested secrecy and exclusivity. In US history, the word enclave is used to describe a closed-off region, often militarized or politically isolated. Developers wanted the Enclave to feel like a shadow remnant of the US government, fitting their bunker-dwelling militarism. In Fallout 2, players could become a porn star in New Reno, one of the game's most infamous quests. What most people don't know is that the developers actually researched adult film contracts to write the in-game documents the Chosen One signs. The performance stats are based on charisma and endurance, with hidden scripts for particularly poor performances. Dogmeat's harsh mortality in Fallout 1 was so notorious that Fallout 2 included the magnetic personality and animal friend perks, partly as a tongue-in-cheek nod. Developers knew fans wanted Dogmeat and other animal companions to survive longer, so they coded in mechanics to protect them, although not perfectly. In Fallout Tactics, a cut random encounter involved the player stumbling upon a Deep One-style mutant worshipping strange idols. The event was removed, but its remnants are buried in the game files. This was a direct nod to H.P. Lovecraft, whom Fallout designers often cited as inspiration for the weird science elements of mutation and the unknown. While Caesar's Legion is overtly Roman, Josh Sawyer has explained that the Legion's brutality and ideology was modeled less after Julius Caesar's historical strategies and more on 20th century dictators like Mussolini. The pomp, propaganda, and obsession with control reflect fascist Italy far more than the ancient republic. Moira Brown's infamous Wasteland survival guide questline was initially considered filler. Bethesda nearly cut it because it was long and complex. However, designers kept it because it showcased player choice at every level. Ironically, it became one of the most beloved and defining questlines in Fallout 3. The Silver Shroud radio drama in Fallout 4 drew directly from fan-made role-playing content and mods where players pretended to be masked vigilantes in Fallout 3. Bethesda noticed this community trend and built an official questline around it, complete with costumes and a moral dilemma. Every single cryptid in Fallout 76, including the Mothman, Flatwoods Monster, and Grafton Monster, is drawn from real-life Appalachian folklore. Bethesda actually sent writers to interview locals about these legends to capture their regional flavor. The Mothman in particular became so popular that 76 leans into him almost as a mascot. The 2004 Fallout Brotherhood of Steel console game, Not Tactics, had licensed music from Slipknot and Killswitch Engage, making it stand out tonally from the main series' 40s-50s aesthetic. Licensing disputes later prevented re-releases of the game on digital storefronts, part of why it remains obscure. The Pip-Boy's cheerful cartoon mascot was deliberately created to be unsettling. Inspired by Cold War propaganda mascots, he represented the cheerful face of annihilation, encouraging people to obey Vault-Tec despite their sinister intentions. This duality became one of Fallout's most enduring stylistic choices. Vault 12, where the door failed to seal and exposed the inhabitants to radiation, was written in a single night by designer Scott Benny. He wanted an origin story for ghouls that was both horrific and bureaucratic, showing how Vault-Tec doomed entire populations with experiments. In Fallout 2, the Chosen One can encounter the Bridgekeeper, a clear parody of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. He asks trivia questions, and wrong answers lead to combat. What's lesser known is that his robe is technically the most powerful armor in the game, but it's hidden under joke stats unless the player digs into the code. The idea of a town built around a dormant nuke was pitched as too unbelievable by some Bethesda designers. Todd Howard pushed for it, insisting that Fallout is more absurdly grounded in seriousness. The quest, The Power of the Atom, became one of Fallout 3's most defining moral dilemmas. Fallout 2 featured a talking intelligent Deathclaw named Gorus. This was later considered too far-fetched by Bethesda when they took over the franchise, so talking Deathclaws were retconned as failed genetic experiments that no longer exist. Goris remains one of the most debated characters in Fallout lore. Hardcore mode, which requires food, water, and sleep, was directly inspired by fan mods for Fallout 3. Josh Sawyer openly acknowledged these mods and worked with Obsidian to make the feature official, blending survival mechanics with role-playing depth. The Responder faction in Fallout 76, who tried to organize rescue and aid in the wasteland, were based on real Appalachian volunteer firefighters and EMT organizations. Bethesda wanted at least one faction to represent genuine selflessness, contrasting with the usual corruption of Fallout factions. Beyond the water chip time limit, developers initially designed a second hidden timer. If too much time passed, the Master's army would overrun the wasteland regardless of your choices. This was scrapped because playtesters hated unavoidable bad endings. The Hubologists, who worship cosmic energy and spaceships, were written as a thinly veiled satire of Scientology. Designers even joked about being sued. Their questline ends with an ill-fated rocket launch, a jab at the cult's obsession with space transcendence. Bethesda reused assets from the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion for Fallout 3. The skeleton and rigging for super mutants is actually the same as orcs in Oblivion. This explains some of their oddly exaggerated animations. Nick Valentine's character was directly inspired by classic noir detectives like Sam Spade. His mannerisms, trench coat, and monologues were meant to feel ripped from 1940s pulp novels. Valentine became so beloved that fans petitioned for him to star in his own spin-off. Nuka-Cola Quantum's glowing look was developed long before Fallout 76, but the electric blue soda concept was based on Pepsi Blue, which was released in 2002 and quickly discontinued. Developers wanted a drink that looked toxic yet delicious. A sequel to Brotherhood of Steel in development and would have featured locations like Las Vegas, not to be confused with New Vegas, and tactics-inspired mechanics. It was cancelled when Interplay lost financial stability, and all assets were scrapped. Ian, the first human companion in Fallout 1, was notorious for accidentally shooting the player during combat due to poor AI pathing. Fans joked about his betrayal was canon, leading to community memes about Ian being secretly untrustworthy. Joshua Graham, the Burned Man, was intentionally written as a living legend. Writers originally debated if he should have died in the Grand Canyon as logic would dictate. They decided his survival emphasized themes of faith, resilience, and myth-building in the wasteland. If the player frees the synths in Fallout 4, the narrative parallels Blade Runner, especially the escaped replicants theme. Bethesda even noted in commentary that the Railroad faction was their homage to the replicant struggle. Fallout Tactics includes endings where the Brotherhood uses advanced technology to conquer huge regions. Later games downplay this because Bethesda only considers some events from Tactics canon. This created one of Fallout's longest-running lore debates. Harold the Ghoul Tree hybrid wasn't originally going to be in Fallout 3. Bethesda included him after fan pressure, but Todd Howard admitted later that they weren't sure what to do with him, leading to his final, tragic role in Oasis. A cut encounter in Fallout 2 involved fighting an unstoppable robot called the Infiltrator, a parody of the Terminator. It was removed for time constraints, but still exists in partial code. Choosing Fenway Park wasn't just a Boston reference. Developers wanted to symbolize a community forming inside the ruins of an American pastime. Baseball's themes of tradition and nostalgia mirrored Fallout's retro-futuristic tone. The Mothman shrines in Fallout 76 don't always summon the same variant. Some versions bless the player with buffs, while others summon hostile Mothmen. This reflects real folklore, where the Mothman is seen as alternatively as a protector or a harbinger of doom. The slideshow endings in Fallout 1, which narrate the fates of towns based on player choices, were inspired directly by Interplay's earlier RPG Wasteland. Fallout was originally conceived as a spiritual successor, so the ending mechanic was carried over. The Pit DLC in Fallout 3, which takes place in a raider-run steel mill, was designed as a commentary on industrial labor abuse. The setting and oppressive conditions drew inspiration from Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. Liberty Prime was nearly left out of Fallout 4 due to technical limitations. Animating the giant robot moving through a dense city was challenging, but Bethesda re-engineered the animations from Fallout 3 to make it feasible. When Fallout 76 was first announced, developers envisioned nukes as a way for groups to unlock raids and rare loot zones. Instead, players quickly used them to grief others. Bethesda later patched in safeguards to limit abuse. The Master, Fallout's final boss, was voiced by Philip Athens, who was also a lead designer. His lines were heavily distorted with audio layering to create the unsettling multi-voice effect, symbolizing the Master's many consciousnesses fused together. The Dunwich Building in Fallout 3, a terrifying location tied to Lovecraftian horror, was intentionally left unresolved so Bethesda could revisit the theme later. Fallout 4's Dunwich Borrowers expanded on this, cementing Fallout's unofficial ties to cosmic horror. Marcus, the friendly super mutant sheriff on Broken Hills, was voiced by Michael Dorn, best known as Worf in Star Trek: The Next Generation. Dorn later reprised his role in Fallout New Vegas, cementing Marcus as one of Fallout's most iconic characters. Codsworth, the robotic butler, was programmed to recognize and speak over 900 possible player character names. This massive voice acting effort was one of the most ambitious personalization features in Fallout history. The Mordino, Bishop, Wright, and Salvatore families in New Reno were all modeled loosely on real-world mafia families from the West Coast and Nevada. Writers researched organized crime extensively to give each family authentic quirks and rivalries. Vault 108, where the player encounters nothing but clones of a man named Gary, was created as a Darkly Comet Vault experiment. Developers joked that it was their lazy vault, since it only required recording one set of voice lines over and over again. Yes Man, the ever-agreeable AI, was created specifically for players who didn't trust or like any major faction. Writers wanted to provide a true independence ending, where the player could take power without aligning with NCR, Caesar's Legion, or Mr. House. The in-game Nuka-Cola plant in West Virginia is based on a real Kanawha soda bottling facility. Bethesda altered details but used real maps of the site for environmental design. The Chosen One's car, one of the first drivable vehicles in Fallout history, caused major issues for developers. It constantly broke maps, dialogue triggers, and inventory systems. Entire weeks were spent debugging it. That's partly why vehicles disappeared in later Fallout games. President Eden, the AI running the Enclave in Fallout 3, was deliberately written as a commentary on Cold War fears of machines taking control of nuclear weapons. His calm, patriotic voice was meant to contrast with the horror of an unfeeling computer deciding humanity's fate. The reveal that Sean is actually a synth child was added late in development. Early drafts had him remain a kidnapped biological son. Bethesda added the synth twist to emphasize Fallout 4's themes of identity, memory, and humanity. The design of Deathclaws was directly influenced by the xenomorph from Alien. Developers wanted a terrifying, fast predator that felt like a force of nature, not just another mutant. Their claws and hunched posture echo Geiger's Alien designs. In New Vegas, the final battle at Hoover Dam can play out in dozens of permutations based on choices. Designers revealed that the scripting for the battle is so fragile that even minor bugs can cause entire armies not to spawn. This makes it one of the most unstable, yet ambitious endings in RPG history. The DC Metro tunnels in Fallout 3 were infamous among developers. Bethesda admitted that the confusing maze design was partly unintentional, caused by a rush to connect map cells without a master layout. Fans hated it, but it became oddly iconic. President Richardson, the Enclave leader in Fallout 2, has no scenario where he survives the game. Writers intentionally forced his death because they wanted the Enclave to feel like it had no future. The Railroad's headquarters in Fallout 4, hidden beneath Old North Church, was inspired by real crypts and tunnels beneath Boston churches. Bethesda designers toured some of these historical sites for reference. The Wild Wasteland Park, which unlocks dozens of bizarre pop culture encounters, was controversial among developers. Some argued it broke immersion. It stayed because Josh Sawyer wanted a switch that let players choose how silly they wanted their Fallout. The Fast Not Day event in Fallout 76, featuring strange masks and parades, is based on a real Swiss-German tradition in Helvetia, West Virginia. Bethesda faithfully recreated many of the festival's quirks, blending local culture with wasteland absurdity. In the original Fallout 3 ending, the player was forced to sacrifice themselves by entering Project Purity's chamber, regardless of companions. Testers hated this lack of choice. Bethesda patched it with broken steel, allowing alternate outcomes. The Minutemen faction's design and structure directly reference colonial militias from the American Revolution. Bethesda wanted a faction that embodied grassroots resistance, contrasting with your authoritarian NCR and Enclave. Fallout tactics included a tribe of intelligent Deathclaws who could speak and form alliances with humans. This was one of the strangest storylines in Fallout history, and it contributed to tactics' semi-canon status. Vault City, a pristine settlement in Fallout 2, was designed as a commentary on eugenics and exclusionary societies. Its obsession with genetic purity and harsh laws satirized real-world debates on who deserves citizenship. In Tenpenny Tower, even if you broke a peace between ghouls and humans, the humans eventually massacre the ghouls off-screen. Bethesda wanted to underline that sometimes in Fallout, No compromise leads to lasting peace. Preston Garvey's repetitive settlement quests were caused by a scripting oversight that kept recycling the same Radiant missions. Bethesda didn't intend him to become a meme, but "another settlement needs your help" became one of Fallout's most infamous lines. The iconic NCR Ranger combat armor, with its trench coat and glowing red goggles, was inspired by German World War II-era gas masks combined with Wild West imagery. It became so iconic that Bethesda later reused it in Fallout 76 as a pre-order bonus. When Fallout 76 launched without human NPCs, players revolted. The Wastelanders update in 2020 was essentially a soft reboot of the entire game, reintroducing traditional dialogue trees and factions to restore Fallout's RPG identity. Early drafts of Fallout 1's ending allowed the Vault Dweller to take control of the Vault after defeating the Master. Developers cut it because they felt the story should emphasize exile and tragedy, not personal power. The boxing minigame in New Reno was inspired by real boxing legends of the 20th century. Writers inserted subtle references to fighters like Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson into opponent styles and dialogue. 3 dogs rotating radio updates in Fallout 3 required a massive amount of conditional scripting. Bethesda said it was one of the hardest systems to implement because it had to track hundreds of player decisions dynamically. Automatron, the first Fallout 4 DLC, was written as a direct homage to cheesy 1950s sci-fi robot invasion stories. The Mechanist costume and dialogue were patterned on pulp comic villains. Vault Zero, the brain of the US war machine in Fallout Tactics, was originally meant to serve as a future hub for sequels. Interplay intended to make multiple spin-offs around Vault Zero's influence before the franchise changed hands. In Fallout 2, players could find talking two-headed Brahmin. This bizarre encounter was inserted by developers as a late-night joke, but made it into the final build. It's one of the strangest canon moments in Fallout. The Point Lookout DLC in Fallout 3 was intentionally disconnected from the Enclave plot. Bethesda designed it as a standalone survival horror experience to experiment with tone and storytelling variety. The Institute's secretive underground labs were modeled after Cold War-era fears of hidden government facilities like Cheyenne Mountain. Bethesda wanted them to feel like both a utopia and a nightmare, reflecting paranoia about technology. Mr. House, the reclusive tycoon controlling New Vegas, was heavily inspired by Howard Hughes. Like Hughes, Howe was obsessed with aviation, technology, and immortality, and became a hermit in his later life. The main Overseer NPC in Fallout 76 marked the first time Bethesda made a Vault Overseer central to a Fallout game story. This was done to emphasize the Overseer logs as a narrative tool. Shady Sands, a tiny town in Fallout 1, was expanded into the capital of the NCR in Fallout 2 simply because writers needed a base for the growing Republic. Its humble origins contrasted with its later political power. The Gecko nuclear plant dilemma, where Vault City debates whether to share or hoard energy, was inspired by 1990s energy policy debates in California, where nuclear power was hotly contested. The Operation Anchorage DLC, a simulation of the Chinese invasion of Alaska, was written primarily to let players finally see the famous war only hinted at in lore. It had little to do with the main plot, but satisfied longtime fan curiosity. The settlement building system in Fallout 4 was originally conceived as a side feature. Todd Howard pushed for it to become a core mechanic after seeing how popular mods like Fallout 3's player homes had been. Early prototypes of Fallout Tactics experimented with a first-person mode, years before Bethesda took the franchise in that direction. Developers quickly abandoned it due to technical limitations. The strange talking plants in Fallout 2 were originally meant as a wild wasteland-style joke, but were never marked as non-canon. They remain an odd, unexplained piece of Fallout's world. In Fallout 3, super mutants come from Vault 87's FEV experiments. This was Bethesda's retcon to explain their East Coast presence, since previously they were West Coast only. Fans still debate the plausibility of this. The fog-shrouded island of Far Harbor was directly inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's The Shadow over Innsmouth. The cult-like children of Atom in the DLC were a nod to Lovecraft's fish-worshipping cults. Several planned companion quests, including deeper arcs for Arcade Gannon and Veronica, were cut due to time constraints. Obsidian developers later admitted they wished they had more time to flesh them out. Vault 94 was introduced as Fallout 76's first raid-style dungeon, but it was plagued by bugs and performance issues. Bethesda eventually shut it down entirely, making it one of the most short-lived pieces of Fallout content. The Glow Dungeon was deliberately designed to punish unprepared players. Developers wanted it to feel like a survival horror level in the middle of an RPG. Fallout 2 had far fewer animated talking heads than Fallout 1 because the animations ate up too much disk space. Designers prioritized certain characters, leaving most NPCs without them. If the player progresses far enough with Liberty Prime before entering Raven Rock, scripts exist to allow Prime to nuke it entirely. This was cut for stability, but partially restored by modders. Early drafts of Fallout 4 had Kellogg as the main antagonist, with the Institute taking a back seat. Writers later decided he should be a stepping stone villain instead, leading to the Shaun Institute twist. The design of recruitable robots in Fallout Tactics was heavily influenced by the MechWarrior franchise. Developers wanted players to feel like they were commanding a ragtag mercenary force with diverse unit types. The design of recruitable robots in Fallout Tactics was heavily influenced by the MechWarrior franchise. Developers wanted players to feel like they were commanding a ragtag mercenary force with diverse unit types. In Fallout 2, President Tandy's aide carries a Mr. Nixon doll, a direct parody of Richard Nixon. It was a late-night joke quest item poking fun at political scandals. Bethesda designed Fallout 3's DLCs to feel like different genres. Anchorage, being military sim, The Pit, being industrial survival, Broken Steel, being epic continuation, Point Lookout, being horror, and Mothership Zeta, being sci-fi comedy. This was meant to showcase Fallout's tonal flexibility. Settlement defense missions in Fallout 4 were bugged at launch, with enemies often spawning inside walls or missing entirely. Bethesda patched them repeatedly, but never fully fixed the system. Obsidian used real engineering blueprints of Hoover Dam to construct the in-game location, adjusting scale only slightly for gameplay. The Brotherhood of Steel appears in Fallout 76 decades earlier than lore allowed. Bethesda later explained this through Lost Expedition retcons, but fans still debate the continuity break. Originally, the cartoon mascot was Pip-Boy, but to avoid confusion with the wrist computer, designers renamed him Vault-Boy. Fans still mix them up. If the Chosen One has very low intelligence, entire dialogue trees change. The dumb dialogue path is so extensive, the developers joked it was like writing a whole second game. Enclave Radio, which only plays patriotic music, was originally going to feature propaganda speeches from President Eden. These were cut due to time, but restored in some mods. The glowing green teleportation effect for the Institute was one of the most complex visual effects Bethesda had made up to that point. It was designed to sell the Institute's technological superiority. In Fallout 76, players can find Nuka-Cola mystery flavor. Bethesda actually ran a real-world version of this, sending out mystery-flavored sodas to influencers without revealing the flavor, blurring the line between the in-game marketing and real-world promotions. And so, we come to the end of our journey through the ashes of the old world. The bombs have fallen, the vault doors have closed, and the wasteland sleeps once more. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the hum of a Pip-Boy in the distance, or the echo of a Vault-Tec jingle playing somewhere deep underground. Thank you for wandering with me tonight through the ruins of the post-apocalypse. May your dreams be safe, your rads be low, and your next respawn gentle. Good night.